talking about your trauma or talking about your problems is good if you've never been able to say it out loud, right? But part of it is trauma happens in the body more than it happens in the brain. And so our cells remember everything. Our subconscious mind remembers everything. Our energetic system remembers everything. So if you're talking about trauma connects into our chemistry, when you get traumatized, and let's define trauma for this event. Trauma is not something violent that happened to you or something really heinous that people might think about. Oh, my dad shut me in the basement for 5 weeks and didn't feed me. That's trauma for sure, right? But it doesn't have to be trauma like that. Just simply when you're a baby, not being held or your needs not being met is trauma to the nervous system, right? And so it's not, I think that was traumatic. It's what your chemistry and body does when it feels the neglect or the lack of somebody coming to you when you're a baby and you're crying. So pre-verbal trauma is between before birth and 2 years old. You'll never be able to talk about because you had no words to identify what was going on. So there's a lot of pre-verbal trauma that happens that most people carry around for their entire lives because they can't talk about it. There's nothing to talk about. They just know something's wrong and they keep repeating these self-destructive patterns. So when I was working on healing the trauma that I'd had in my childhood, and I had quite a lot, both overt and covert trauma that was obvious and trauma that wasn't obvious. And did the therapy thing, went on to do, all of these like supposedly crazy things, everything. I was searching the planet, basically. How do you actually heal trauma instead of disconnect from it, cover it up, which is another way, disassociate, just not feel anything anymore. There's so many ways, or overdo it, like run patterns that are like, in the opposite direction. And I didn't find anything that was sustainable or worked. So I started looking into, okay, so my work with animals, I worked with animals before I worked with people. And when animals are traumatized, it's pretty clear they have behavioral issues, they have all sorts of things. And I had a gift with working with animals and being able to see where they held their trauma in their body. An animal's not going to talk to me verbally, right? So how do you help an animal heal trauma? Well, it's through energetic and somatic body work. It's through touching the animal in different places in certain ways that causes them to take a deep breath and release it. And that idea of contraction and expansion started me on the journey of, so when the body contracts in fear, it'll get held and the breath gets stuck. And so usually we shake after fear or trauma. Big trauma will shake. And that's a way to release the trauma from the nervous system. But we're not allowed to do that a lot as people. People will do something to cut that experience down. So that freeze response or that flight response, the different responses are usually about contraction. And if it's hard or goes on repeatedly, you build a neural pathway in the brain that says, this is normal. This is how we are. Our chemistry changes, right? Our neurochemistry. Our reactions and patterns change. Our body tension changes. Our breath pattern changes. People can even become reverse breathers. Instead of the natural belly breathing, they stop doing that and they breathe high in the chest and they never take a deep breath again. And so there's a lot that happens. So through that exploration, and then with my Tantra lineage, which is not the Neo-Tantra that most people think about sex, but actual transformation practices, and neurobiology. I wanted to be a neurosurgeon, so I had a heavy background in science, and that I started to figure out how to put these pieces together and how to actually go, we have to do a multidisciplinary approach. We can't just heal. And my thing, the why doesn't matter. Why did it happen? What happened? That doesn't matter. That doesn't heal you. I can take somebody and know nothing about them and start them from here forward and clear their trauma. But people want a story and tell their story. And every time you do that, you build that neural pathway deeper and deeper and deeper, and it's harder actually to get over the trauma. Science is caught up. There are now things called neuroaffect. The somatic psychology is becoming a new big thing because psychologists, therapists are realizing, I got my person in my chair for 10 years and they've talked about all of this and they still have trauma. So what do we do? So yeah, that's a little bit of, I mean, obviously could go on for a long time about that, but that's it. You can't heal your nervous system by talking about it. That's the short version of that.